shy waitress signed to Billionaire's deaf mother. His reaction left everyone in tears. The dinner hall of the luxurious Grand Palace Hotel was filled with wealthy guests enjoying expensive meals beneath sparkling crystal chandeliers. Waiters hurried between tables while soft piano music floated through the room. Among the staff was 22-year-old Emily Carter, a shy waitress who rarely spoke more than necessary. She wasn't the fastest employee, nor the loudest, but everyone knew her for her kindness and patience. While other workers spent breaks laughing together, Emily usually sat quietly with a cup of tea and a book. Most people never noticed her, and she was perfectly fine with that. What no one in the hotel knew was that Emily had grown up with a deaf father. Since childhood, sign language had been a part of her everyday life. She had learned that communication was more than words and sounds. Sometimes understanding came through expressions, gestures, and simple kindness. One Friday evening the hotel manager rushed into the staff room looking nervous. "Everyone pay attention," he announced. "Mr. Alexander Reed and his mother are arriving tonight. I don't want any mistakes." The room instantly became quiet. Alexander Reed was one of the youngest billionaires in the country. His technology empire was worth billions, and newspapers constantly wrote about his companies, investments, and success. Employees straightened their uniforms and prepared for the important guests. At exactly 7 o'clock, a long black luxury car stopped outside the hotel entrance. Alexander stepped out first, tall and confident in a perfectly tailored black suit. Then he carefully opened the door for his elderly mother, Eleanor Reed. She smiled politely at the staff but remained silent as they entered the restaurant. The manager personally escorted them to the finest table near the large windows overlooking the city lights. Emily was assigned to serve them. Nervously holding her notepad, she approached the table with a gentle smile. "Good evening and welcome to the Grand Palace Hotel," she said softly. Eleanor looked at her warmly but didn't respond. Instead, she turned toward her son. Alexander offered an apologetic smile. "My mother is deaf," he explained. Emily paused for a moment before smiling even wider. Then she raised her hands and signed, "Good evening. It's wonderful to meet you." Eleanor froze in surprise. Her eyes widened as she stared at Emily's moving hands. Slowly, her own hands began to move. "You know sign language," she signed back. Emily nodded. "My father is deaf. Sign language was my first language at home." Eleanor's expression immediately changed. The quiet sadness in her eyes disappeared and was replaced by excitement. For the first time that evening, she smiled broadly. The two women continued signing while discussing the menu. Emily explained the chef's recommendations, the ingredients, and even joked about how the chef believed extra cheese could improve every meal. Eleanor laughed loudly enough that several nearby guests turned to look. Alexander watched silently from across the table. He couldn't remember the last time he had seen his mother laugh like that. Ever since his father passed away nearly 10 years earlier, Eleanor had slowly withdrawn from the world. Most people avoided conversations with her because they didn't know sign language. Others spoke only to Alexander instead of speaking directly to her. Over time she stopped attending social events, family gatherings, and public dinners. She spent most days sitting quietly in her garden or reading books alone. But tonight was different. Emily wasn't speaking through Alexander. She wasn't treating Eleanor as invisible. She was speaking directly to her, laughing with her, and listening carefully to every story she shared. During dinner Eleanor signed stories about her childhood, her travels across Europe, and the bakery she once dreamed of opening with her husband many years ago. Emily listened carefully and responded with genuine interest. Nearly 2 hours passed, but neither woman noticed the time. Alexander simply sat there watching his mother become the person he remembered from his childhood. When dessert arrived, Alexander quietly stepped onto the balcony overlooking the city skyline. The hotel manager nervously approached him. "Mr. Reed, is there any problem with the service?" Alexander looked back through the glass windows toward his mother, who was smiling and laughing with Emily. His eyes softened. "No," he said quietly. "For the first time in years, everything is perfect." The manager looked confused. Alexander continued, "I haven't seen my mother smile like that since my father died." For a moment he couldn't say anything else. He simply watched them through the window. By the end of the evening, Eleanor reached for Emily's hands before leaving. "Thank you," she signed. Emily smiled politely. "You're welcome." Eleanor shook her head and signed again. "No, thank you for seeing me." Emily looked confused. Eleanor continued, "Most people notice my deafness before they notice me." Emily felt tears gathering in her eyes. "My father used to say the same thing," she signed back softly. Eleanor gently squeezed her hands before leaving the restaurant. Before walking away, Alexander handed Emily his business card. "Please call me if you ever need anything," he said sincerely. Emily thanked him and assumed she would never hear from him again. The following morning, the hotel manager asked Emily to come to his office immediately. Worried that she had somehow upset the billionaire family, she nervously entered the room. To her surprise, Alexander Reed was sitting there waiting for her. He stood as she entered. "Please sit down," he said kindly. Emily sat quietly. Alexander took a deep breath before speaking. "After my father died, my mother slowly disappeared from the world. I hired assistants, nurses, interpreters, companions, and therapists. Nothing worked. They were professional, but they couldn't give her what she needed." Emily listened carefully. Alexander looked down for a moment before continuing. "Last night I saw something I thought I'd never see again. I saw my mother happy." He placed an envelope on the desk. Inside was an offer for a part-time position as Eleanor's companion and communication assistant. The salary was more money than Emily had ever imagined earning in a year. Her eyes widened in disbelief. "There must be people more qualified than me," she whispered. Alexander shook his head. "I'm not looking for qualifications. I'm looking for someone who treats my mother like a person instead of a responsibility." Emily didn't know what to say. A week later, she accepted the offer. Over the following months, Eleanor's life transformed completely. She began visiting parks, museums, and art galleries again. She attended deaf community events and even started teaching sign language classes to children. The woman who had once hidden from the world slowly came back to life. One afternoon Alexander returned home early from work. As he walked into the garden, he stopped in his tracks. Under a large tree sat his mother, laughing harder than he had heard in years while Emily acted out a funny story about a runaway dog stealing bread from a bakery. Eleanor's laughter echoed through the garden. Alexander stood silently watching them. Tears slowly filled his eyes. Eleanor noticed him standing there and signed 4 simple words. "I feel alive again." Alexander could no longer hold back his emotions. All his wealth, businesses, private jets, and success had failed to give his mother what she truly needed. She didn't need more money. She didn't need luxury. She needed connection. She needed understanding. Most of all, she needed someone willing to speak her language. Alexander walked toward Emily with tears in his eyes. "You gave me my mother back," he said quietly. Emily smiled and shook her head. "No," she replied softly. "She was always here. Someone simply needed to listen." Alexander looked toward his mother sitting beneath the tree with the biggest smile he had seen in nearly a decade. In that moment he realized something that every billionaire in the world should know. Money can buy houses, companies, and success, but kindness, understanding, and human connection are priceless gifts that no amount of wealth can ever purchase. And as the sun slowly disappeared behind the horizon, there wasn't a single dry eye in the garden.